Butterfly in the sky, I can go twice as high. Take a look, it's in a book, a reading rainbow. I can go anywhere, friends to know and ways to grow, a reading rainbow. I can be anything. Take a look, it's in a book, a reading rainbow. A reading rainbow. A reading rainbow. A reading rainbow. A reading rainbow.
It's Rico's Reads. Gather around, boys and girls, with your blankets, your pillows, and your favorite alcoholic beverages, and listen to Uncle Rico read you a story. And now here's your host, Rico DiGiorgio.
Hi, everyone. Let's let me switch over to this. And lock that. There we go. How's everyone doing? As you can see, I'm wearing a Hogwarts robe without an emblem. I was the Hogwarts dropout. They won't let me keep the tag anymore. All right, let's give it a couple minutes for last minute stragglers. Let's see. Tilt that up just a little bit. Got the fire going on. Everyone drinking tonight? I'm not drinking. I'm sticking with apple juice. I might have to drive later. Maybe. Aha. All right. I think any last minute stragglers probably show up in a minute. So, without further ado, Chapter 10, Halloween. CJ's favorite chapter. Malfoy couldn't believe his eyes when he saw that Harry and Ron were still at Hogwarts the next day, looking tired but perfectly cheerful. Indeed, by the next morning, Harry and Ron thought that meeting the three-headed dog had been an excellent adventure, and were quite keen to have another one. In the meantime, Harry filled Ron in about the package that seemed to have been moved from Gringotts to Hogwarts, and they spent a lot of time wondering what could possibly need such heavy protection. "It's either really valuable or really dangerous," said Ron. "Or both," said Harry. But as all they knew for sure about the mysterious object was that it was about 2 inches long, they didn't have much chance of guessing what it was without further clues. I'm here to tell you, most things that are 2 inches long are not that mysterious. Neither Neville nor Hermione showed the slightest interest in what lay underneath the dog and the trapdoor. All Neville cared about was never going near the dog again. Hermione was now refusing to speak to Harry and Ron, but she was such a bossy know-it-all that they saw it as an added bonus. Neat. All they really wanted now was a way of getting back at Malfoy, and to their great delight, just such a thing arrived in the mail about a week later. Like, Harry, you just discovered you're a wizard, you're learning magic, and you care more about, let's get back to Malfoy. Fucking learn how to do some shit. As the owls flooded into the great hall as usual, everyone's attention was caught at once by a long, thin package carried by 6 large screech owls. Harry was just as interested as everyone else to see what was in this large parcel, and was amazed when the owl soared down and dropped it right in front of him, knocking his bacon to the floor. Rude fucking owls. They had hardly fluttered out of the way when another owl dropped a letter on top of the parcel. Harry ripped open the letter first, which was lucky because it said, "Do not open the parcel at the table. It contains your new Nimbus 2000, but I don't want everybody knowing you've got a broomstick or they'll all want one. Oliver Wood will meet you tonight on the Quidditch field at 7 o'clock for the first training session. Professor M. McGonagall." Harry had difficulty hiding his glee as he handed the note to Ron to read. A Nimbus 2000, Ron moaned enviously. I've never even touched one. That's what she said. They left the hall quickly, wanting to unwrap the broomstick in private before their first class, but halfway across the entrance hall they found the way upstairs barred by Crab and Goyle. Malfoy seized the package. Malfoy seized Harry's package and felt it. That's a that's a broomstick. Yeah, it is, buddy, he said, throwing it back to Harry with a mixture of jealousy and spite on his face. You'll be in it for this time, Potter. First years aren't allowed them. Ron couldn't resist it. It's not any old broomstick, he said. It's a Nimbus 2000. What did you say you've got at home, Malfoy? A Comet 260? Ron grinned at Harry. Comets look flashy, but they're not in the same league as the Nimbus. What would you know about it, Weasley? You can afford half the handle. Malfoy snapped back. I suppose you and your brothers have to save up twig by twig. Before Ron could answer, Professor Flitwick appeared at Malfoy's elbow. Not arguing, I hope, boys, he squeaked. Potter's been sent a broomstick, Professor, said Malfoy quickly. Yes, that's right, said Professor Flitwick, beaming at Harry. Professor McGonagall told me all about the special circumstances, Potter. And what model is it? A Nimbus 2000, sir, said Harry, fighting not to laugh at the look of horror on Malfoy's face. And it's really thanks to Malfoy here that I've got it, he added. Harry and Ron headed upstairs, smothering their laughter at Malfoy's obvious rage and confusion. Well, it's true, Harry chortled as they reached the top of the marble staircase. If he hadn't stolen Neville's Remember-All, I wouldn't be on the team. So I suppose you think that's a reward for breaking rules, came an angry voice from just behind them. Hermione was stomping up the stairs, looking disapprovingly at the package in Harry's hand. I thought you weren't speaking to us, said Harry. Yes, don't stop now, said Ron. It's doing us so much good. Hermione marched away with her nose in the air. Harry had a lot of trouble keeping his mind on his lessons that day. He kept wandering up to the dormitory where his new broomstick was laying under his bed, or straying off to the Quidditch field where he'd be learning to play that night. He bolted his dinner that evening without noticing what he was eating, and then rushed upstairs with Ron to unwrap the Nimbus 2000 at last. Wow, Ron sighed as the broomstick rolled onto Harry's bedspread. This could be dirty. This could be a dirty book if you just read it in the right tone. Even Harry, who knew nothing about the different brooms, thought it looked wonderful. Sleek and shiny with a mahogany handle, it had a long tail of neat, straight twigs and Nimbus 2000 writing in gold near the top. As 7 o'clock drew nearer, Harry left the castle and set off in the dusk toward the Quidditch field. He'd never been inside the stadium before. Hundreds of seats were raised in stands around the field so that the spectators were high enough to see what was going on. At either end of the field were 3 golden poles with hoops on the end. They reminded Harry of the little plastic sticks Muggle children blew bubbles through, except that they were 50 feet high. Too eager to fly again to wait for wood, Harry mounted his broomstick and kicked off from the ground. What a feeling. He swooped in and out of the goalposts and then sped up and down the field. The Nimbus 2000 turned wherever he wanted at his lightest touch. Hey, Potter, come down! Oliver Wood had arrived. He was carrying a large wooden crate under his arm. Harry landed next to him. Very nice, said Wood, his eyes glinting. I see what McGonagall meant. You really are a natural. I'm just going to teach you the rules this evening, then you'll be joining team practice 3 times a week. He opened the crate. Inside were 4 different size balls. That usually happens. Right, said Wood. Now, Quidditch is easy enough to understand, even if it's not too easy to play. There are 7 players on each side. 3 of them are called chases. 3 chases, Harry repeated, as Wood took out a bright red ball about the size of a soccer ball. This ball's called the quaffle. said Wood. The chasers throw the quaffle to each other and try and get through one of the hoops to score a goal. 10 points every time the quaffle goes through one of the hoops. Follow me? The chasers throw the quaffle and put it through the hoops to score. Harry said, so what's sort of like basketball on broomsticks with 6 hoops, isn't it? What's basketball? Said Wood curiously. Never mind, said Harry quickly. Now, there's another player on each side who's called the keeper. I'm keeper for Gryffindor. I have to fly around our hoops and stop the other team from scoring. 3 chasers, 1 keeper, said Harry, who was determined to remember it all. And they play with the quaffle. Okay, got that. So what are they for? He pointed to 3 balls left inside the box. I'll show you now, said Wood. Take this. He handed Harry a small club, a bit like a short baseball bat. I'm going to show you what the bludgers do, Wood said. These 2 are the bludgers. He showed Harry 2 identical balls, jet black and slightly smaller than the red quaffle. Harry noticed that they seemed to be straining to escape the straps holding them inside the box. Stand back, Wood warned Harry. He bent down and freed one of the bludgers. Free the bludger! Hashtag free the bludger. At once, the black ball rose high in the air and then pelted straight at Harry's face. Harry swung it with the bat to stop it from breaking his nose and sent it zigzagging away into the air. It zoomed around their heads and then shot at Wood, who dived on top of it and managed to pin it to the ground. See? Wood panted, forcing the struggling bludger back into the crate and strapping it down safely. The bludgers rocking around trying to knock players off their brooms. That's why you have 2 beaters on each team. The Weasley twins are ours. It's the job to protect this side from the bludgers and try and knock them toward the other team. So, think you've got all that? 3 chasers try and score with the quaffle. The keeper guards the goalpost. The beaters keep the bludgers away from the team. Harry reeled off. Very good, said Wood. Have the bludgers ever killed anyone? Harry asked, hoping he sounded offhand. Never at Hogwarts. We've had a couple of broken jaws, but nothing worse than that. Now, the last member of the team is the Seeker. That's you. And you don't have to worry about the quaffle or the bludgers, unless they crack my head open. Don't worry, the Weasleys are more than a match for the bludgers. I mean, they're like a pair of human bludgers themselves. Wood reached into the crate and took out the 4th and last ball. Compared with the quaffle and the bludgers, it was tiny, about the size of a large walnut. Was bright gold and had little fluttering silver wings. This, said Wood, is the golden snitch, and it's the most important ball of the lot. It's very hard to catch because it's so fast and difficult to see. It's the Seeker's job to catch it. You've got to weave in and out of the chasers, beaters, bludgers, and quaffle to get it before the other team's Seeker, because whichever Seeker catches the snitch wins his team an extra 150 points. They nearly always win. That's why Seekers get fouled so much. A game of Quidditch only ends when the snitch is caught, so it can go on for ages. I think the record is 3 months. They had to keep bringing on substitutes so the players can get some sleep. Well, that's it. Any questions? Harry shook his head. He understood what he had to do. All right. It was doing it that was going to be the problem. We won't practice with the snitch yet, said Wood, carefully shutting it back inside the crate. It's too dark. We might lose it. Let's try you out with a few of these. He pulled a bag of ordinary golf balls out of his pocket, and a few minutes later, he and Harry were up in the air. Wood throwing the golf balls as hard as he could in every direction for Harry to catch. So he doesn't know what basketball is, but he knows what golf is. I mean, okay. Does that mean golf was invented by a wizard? Interesting. Harry didn't miss a single one, and Wood was delighted. After half an hour, night had really fallen, and they couldn't carry on. That Quidditch Cup will have our name on it this year, said Wood happily, as they trudged back up to the castle. I wouldn't be surprised if you turned out better than Charlie Weasley, and he could have played for England if he hadn't gone off chasing dragons. Perhaps it was because he was now so busy, what with Quidditch practice 3 evenings a week on top of all his homework, but Harry could hardly believe it when he realized that he'd been at Hogwarts 2 months. The castle felt more like home than Privet Drive ever had. His lessons, too, were becoming more and more interesting now that they had mastered the basics. On Halloween morning, they woke up. They woke to the delicious smell of baking pumpkin wafting through the corridors. Even better, Professor Flitwick announced in charms that he thought they were ready to start making objects fly, something they all had been dying to try since they had seen him make Neville's toad zoom around the classroom. Professor Flitwick put the class into pairs to practice. Harry's partner was Seamus Finnegan, which was a relief because Neville had been trying to catch his eye. Ron, however, was to be working with Hermione Granger. It was hard to tell whether Ron or Hermione was angry about this. She hadn't spoken to either of them since the day Harry's broomstick had arrived. Now, don't forget that nice wrist movement we've been practicing, squeaked Professor Fuckstick, perched on top of his pile of books as usual. Swish and flick. Remember, swish and flick. And saying the magic words properly is very important too. Never forget Wizard Barufio, who said S instead of F and found himself on the floor with a buffalo on his chest. It was very difficult. Harry and Seamus swished and flicked. Swished, yes. But the feather they were supposed to be sending skyward just lay on the desktop. Seamus got so impatient that he prodded it with his wand and set fire to it. Harry had to put it out with his hat. Ron at the next table wasn't having much more luck. Wingardium Leviosa! He shouted, waving his long arms like a windmill. You're saying it wrong, Harry heard Hermione snap. It's Wingardium Leviosa. Make the gar nice and long. You do it then, if you're so clever, Ron snarled. Hermione rolled up the sleeves of her gown, flicked her wand, and said, Wingardium Leviosa. A feather rose off the desk and hovered about 4 feet above their heads. Oh, well done, cried Professor Flitwick, clapping. Everyone see here, Miss Granger's done it! Ron was in a very bad mood by the end of class. It's no wonder no one can stand her, he said to Harry as they pushed their way into the crowded corridor. She's a nightmare, honestly. Someone knocked into Harry as they hurried past him. It was Hermione. Harry caught a glimpse of her face and was startled to see that she was in tears. I think she hugged you. So? Said Ron, but he looked a bit uncomfortable. She must have noticed she's got no friends. Hermione didn't turn up for the next class and wasn't seen all afternoon. On their way down to the Great Hall for the Halloween feast, Harry and Ron overheard Parvati Patel telling her friend Lavender that Hermione was crying in the girls' bathroom and wanted to be left alone. Ron looked still more awkward at this, but a moment later they had entered the Great Hall, where the Halloween decorations put Hermione out of their minds. 1,000 live bats fluttered from the walls and ceiling, while 1,000 more swooped over the tables in low black clouds, making the candles of the pumpkin stutter. So you're just going to have guano everywhere. Nice. The feast, the guano feast, appeared suddenly on the golden plates as it had at the start of term banquet. Harry was just helping himself to a baked potato when Professor Quirrell came sprinting into the hall, his turban askew and terror on his face. Everyone stared as he reached Professor Dumbledore's chair, slumped against the table, and gasped, Troll in the dungeon! Thought you ought to know. He then sank to the floor in a dead faint. There was an uproar. It took several purple firecrackers exploding from the end of Professor Dumbledore's wand to bring silence. Prefects, he rumbled, lead your house back to the dormitories immediately. Percy was in his element. Follow me! Stick together, first years! No need to fear the troll if you follow my orders. Stay close behind me now. Make way. First years coming through. Excuse me, I'm a prefect. No, you're a prat. Who happens to be a prefect. How could a troll get in? Harry asked as they climbed the stairs. Don't ask me. That's supposed to be really stupid, said Ron. Maybe Peeves let in for a Halloween joke. They passed different groups of people hurrying in different directions as they jostled their way through a crowd of confused Hufflepuffs. Harry suddenly grabbed Ron's arm. I've just thought. Hermione. What about her? She doesn't know about the troll. Ron bit his lip. Oh, all right. But Pussy better not see us. Ducking down, they joined the Hufflepuffs going the other way, slipped down a deserted side corridor, and fucked off toward the girls' bathroom. They had just turned the corner when they heard quick footsteps behind them. Pussy! Hissed Ron, pulling Harry behind a large stone griffin. Peering around it, however, they saw not Percy, but Snape. He crossed the corridor and disappeared from view. What's he doing? Harry whispered. Why isn't he down in the dungeons with the rest of the teachers? Search me. Quietly as possible, they crept along the next corridor after Snape's fading footsteps. He's heading for the third floor, Harry said, but Ron held up his hand. Can you smell something? Harry sniffed, and a foul stench reached his nostrils, a mixture of old socks and the kind of public toilet no one seems to clean. That sounds like a fucking bathroom at a bar. And then they heard it, low grunting, and the shuffling footfalls of gigantic feet. Ron pointed at the end of a passage. To the left, something huge was moving toward them. They shrank into the shadows and watched as it emerged into a patch of moonlight. It was a horrible sight, 12 feet tall. Its skin was a dull granite gray. Its great lumpy body like a boulder, with its small bald head perched on top like a coconut. It had short legs thick as tree trunks with flat, horny feet. The smell coming from it was incredible. It was holding a huge wooden club, which dragged along the floor because its arms were so long. The troll stopped next to the doorway and peered inside. It waggled its long ears, making up its tiny mind, then slouched slowly into the room. The key's in the lock, Harry muttered. We can lock it in. Good idea, said Ron nervously. They edged toward the open door, mouths dry, praying the troll wasn't about to come out of it. With one great leap, Harry managed to grab the key, slam the door, and lock it. Yes! Flushed with their victory, they started to run back up the passage, but as they reached the corner, they heard something that made their hearts stop. A high, petrified scream. It was coming from the chamber they just chained up. Oh no, said Ron, pale as the Bloody Baron. It's the girls' bathroom, Harry gasped. Hermione, they said together. It was the last thing they wanted to do, but what choice did they have? Wheeling around, they sprinted back to the door and turned the key, fumbling in their panic. Harry pulled the door open, and they ran inside. Hermione Granger was shrinking against the wall opposite, looking as if she was about to faint. The troll was advancing on her, knocking the sinks off the walls as it went. Confuse it! Harry said desperately to Ron, and seizing a tap, he threw it as hard as he could against the wall. The troll stopped a few feet from Hermione. It lumbered around, blinking stupidly to see what had made the noise. Its mean little eyes saw Harry. It hesitated, then made for him instead, lifting its club as it went. Oi, pea-brain! Yelled Ron from the other side of the room, and he threw a metal pipe at it. The troll didn't even seem to notice the pipe hitting its shoulders, but it heard the yell and paused again, turning its ugly snout toward Ron instead, giving Harry time to run around it. Come on, run! Run! Harry yelled at Hermione, trying to pull her toward the door, but she couldn't move. She was still flat against the wall, her mouth open with terror. The shouting and the echoes seemed to be driving the troll berserk. It roared again and started toward Ron, who was nearest and had no way to escape. Harry then did something that was both very brave and very fucking stupid. He took a great running jump and managed to fasten his arms around the troll's neck from behind. The troll couldn't feel Harry hanging there, but even a troll would notice if you stick a long bit of wood up its nose, and Harry's wand had still been in his hand when he jumped. It had gone straight up one of the troll's nostrils. Fun fact, in the movie, you could clearly see that Harry, or Daniel Radcliffe, is CGI, because the way the troll is moving and the force and everything Daniel Radcliffe would actually have snapped his neck just for the motion. So rewatch, Philosopher's Stone or Sorcerer's Stone, and see that's very much a CGI Daniel Radcliffe. Howling with pain, the troll twisted and flailed its club, with Harry clinging on for dear life. Any second, the troll was going to rip him off or catch him a terrible blow with the club. Hermione had sunk to the floor in fright. Ron pulled out his own wand. Giggity. Not knowing what he was going to do, he heard himself cry the first spell that came into his head. Wingardium Leviosa! The club flew suddenly out of the troll's hand, rose high up in the air, turned slowly over, and dropped with a sickening crack onto its owner's head. The troll swayed on the spot, then fell flat on its face with a thud that made the whole room tremble. Harry got to his feet. He was shaking and out of breath. Ron was standing there with his wand still raised, staring at what he had done. It was Hermione who spoke first. Is it dead? I don't think so, said Harry. I think it's just been knocked out. He bent down and pulled his wand out of the troll's nose. Giggity. Ew. It was covered in what looked like lumpy gray glue. Ugh, troll boogers. Bogies, that's how they just say it in England. He wiped it on the troll's trousers. A sudden slamming and loud footsteps made the three of them look up. They hadn't realized what a racket they had been making, but of course someone downstairs must have heard the crashes and the troll's roars. A moment later, Professor McGonagall had come bursting into the room, closely followed by Snape, with Quirrell bringing up the rear. Quirrell took one look at the troll, let out a faint whimper, and sat quickly down in the toilet, clutching his heart. Useless. Snape bent over the troll. Professor McGonagall was looking at Ron and Harry. Harry had never seen her look so angry. Her lips were white. Hopes of winning 50 points for Gryffindor faded quickly from Harry's mind. What on earth were you thinking of? Said Professor McGonagall with cold fury in her voice. Harry looked at Ron, who was still standing with his wand in the air. You're lucky you weren't killed. Why aren't you in your dormitory? Snape gave Harry a swift, piercing look. Harry looked at the floor. He wished Ron would put his wand down. Then a small voice came out of the shadows. Please, Professor McGonagall, they were looking for me. Miss Granger! Hermione had managed to get to her feet at last. I went looking for the troll because I thought I could deal with it on my own. Because I've read all about them. Ron dropped his wand. Hermione Granger telling a downright lie to a teacher? If they hadn't found me, I'd be dead now. Harry stuck his wand up its nose, and Ron knocked it out with its own club. They didn't have time to come and fetch anyone. It was about to finish me off when they arrived. Harry and Ron tried to look as though the story wasn't new to them. Well, in that case, said Professor McGonagall, staring at the three of them. Miss Granger, you foolish girl, how could you think of tackling a mountain troll on your own? Hermione hung her head. Harry was speechless. Hermione was the last person to do anything against the rules, and here she was pretending she had, to get them out of trouble. It was as if Snape had started handing out sweets. Miss Granger, 5 points will be taken from Gryffindor for this, said Professor McGonagall. I'm very disappointed in you. If you're not hurt at all, you better get off to Gryffindor Tower. Students are finishing the feast in their houses. Hermione fucked off. Professor McGonagall turned to Harry and Ron. Well, I still say you're very lucky, but not many first years could have taken on a fully grown mountain troll. You each win Gryffindor 5 points. Really? Jesus. Professor Dumbledore will be informed of this. You may go. Which means they earned 5 fucking points. Damn. They hurried out of the chamber and didn't speak at all until they climbed 2 floors up. It was a relief to be away from the smell of the troll, quite apart from anything else. We should have gotten more than 10 points, Ron grumbled. 5, you mean, once she's taken off Hermione's. Good of her to get us out of trouble like that, Ron admitted. Mind you, we did save her. She might not have needed saving if we hadn't locked the thing in with her, Harry reminded him. They had reached the portrait of the fat lady. Pig Snout, they said, and entered. The common room was packed and noisy. Everyone was eating the food that had been sent up. Hermione, however, stood alone by the door, waiting for them. There was a very embarrassed pause. Then none of them looking at each other, they all said thanks and hurried off to get plates. But but from that moment on, Hermione Granger became their friend. There are some things you can't share without ending up liking each other, and knocking out a 12-foot mountain troll is one of them. Chapter 11, Quidditch. As they entered November, the weather turned very cold. The mountains around the school became icy gray, and the lake like chilled steel. Every morning the ground was covered in frost. Hagrid could be seen from the upstairs window, defrosting broomsticks on the Quidditch field, bundled up in a long moleskin overcoat, rabbit fur gloves, and enormous beaver skin boots. The Quidditch season had begun. On Saturday, Harry would be playing in his first match after weeks of training. Gryffindor versus Slytherin. If Gryffindor won, they would move up into second place in the house championship. Hardly anyone had seen Harry play because Wood had decided that, as their secret weapon, Harry should be kept, well, secret. But the news that he was playing secret had leaked out somehow. And Harry didn't know which was worse, people telling him he'd be brilliant or people telling him they'd be running around underneath him holding a mattress. It was really lucky that Harry now had Hermione as a friend. He didn't know how he'd have gotten through all his homework without her, what with all the last-minute Quidditch practice Wood was making them do. She had also lent him Quidditch Through the Ages, which turned out to be a very interesting read. Harry learned that there were 700 ways of committing a Quidditch foul, and that all of them had happened during a World Cup match in 1473. That's a very interesting fucking match, guys. That seekers were usually the smallest and fastest players, and that most serious Quidditch accidents seemed to happen to them. That although people rarely died playing Quidditch, referees have been known to vanish and turn on months later in the Sahara Desert. What the fuck? Just bones in the Sahara, just fucking dead referees with broomsticks. That's fucked up. Hermione had become a bit more relaxed about breaking rules since Harry and Ron had saved her from the mountain troll, and she was much nicer for it. The day before Harry's first Quidditch match, the three of them were out in the freezing courtyard during break, and she had conjured them up a bright blue fire that could be carried around in a jam jar. They were standing with their backs to it, getting warm, when Snape crossed the yard. Harry noticed at once that Snape was limping. Harry, Ron, and Hermione moved closer to block the fire from view. They were sure it wouldn't be allowed. Unfortunately, something about their guilty faces caught Snape's eye. He limped over. He hadn't seen the fire, but he seemed to be looking for a reason to tell them off anyway. What's that you've got there, Potter? It was Quidditch Through the Ages. Harry showed him. Library books are not to be taken outside the school, said Snape. Give it to me. 5 points from Gryffindor. How's that a fucking rule? That doesn't make any bit of goddamn sense. He's just made that rule up, Harry muttered angrily as Snape limped away. Wonder what's wrong with his leg. Don't know, but I hope it's really hurting him, said Ron bitterly. The Gryffindor common room was very noisy that evening. Harry, Ron, and Hermione sat together next to a window. Hermione was checking Harry and Ron's charms homework for them. She would never let them copy. How will you learn? But by asking her to read it through, they got the right answers anyway. Harry felt restless. He wanted Quidditch Through the Ages back to take his mind off his nerves about tomorrow. Why should he be afraid of Snape? Getting up, he told Ron and Hermione he was going to ask Snape if he could have it. Better you than me, they said together, but Harry had an idea that Snape wouldn't refuse if there were other teachers listening. He made his way down to the staff room and knocked. There was no answer. He knocked again. Nothing. Perhaps Snape had left the book in there? It was worth a try. He pushed the door ajar and peered inside, and a horrible scene met his eyes. I'm imagining some really fucked up shit. Ugh. Snape and Filch were inside, alone. Ew! Snape was holding his robes above his knees. Ew! One of his legs was bloody and mangled. That's not that bad. Filch was was handing Snape bandages. Lost the thing, Snape was saying. How are you supposed to keep your eyes on all three hands at once? Harry tried to shut the door quietly, but Potter! Snape's face was twisted with fury as he dropped his robes quickly to hide his leg. His third leg. Harry gulped. God damn it, I'm such a fucking pervert. I just wondered if I could have my book back. Get out! Out! Harry left before Snape could take any more points from Gryffindor. He sprinted back upstairs. Did you get it? Ron asked as Harry joined them. What's the matter? In a low whisper, Harry told him what he had seen. You know what this means, he finished breathlessly. He tried to get past that three-headed dog at Halloween. That's where he was going when he saw him. He's after whatever it's guarding. And I bet my broomstick he'd let that troll in to make a diversion. Hermione's eyes were wide. No, he wouldn't, she said. I know he's not very nice, but he wouldn't try and steal something Dumbledore was keeping safe. Honestly, Hermione, you think all teachers are saints or something, snapped Ron. I'm with Harry. I wouldn't put anything past Snape. But what's he after? What's that dog guarding? Harry went to bed with his head buzzing with the same question. Neville was snoring loudly, but Harry couldn't sleep. Probably because Neville was snoring loudly. He tried to empty his mind. He needed to sleep. He had to. He had his first Quidditch match in a few hours. But the expression on Snape's face when Harry had seen his leg wasn't easy to forget. Yes, Jay, we are all perverts. The next morning dawned very bright and cold. The great hall was full of the delicious smell of fried sausages and the cheerful chatter of everyone looking forward to a good Quidditch match. You've got to eat some breakfast. I don't want anything. Just a bit of toast, wheedled Hermione. I'm not hungry. Harry felt terrible. In an hour's time, he'd be walking onto the field. Harry, you need your strength, said Seamus Finnegan. Seekers are always the ones who get clobbered by the other team. I meant that to be more Irish than Scottish, but came out Scottish. Thanks, Seamus, said Harry, watching Seamus pile ketchup on his sausages. Ketchup on sausages? Okay. By 11 o'clock, the whole Quidditch, Jesus Christ. By 11 o'clock, the whole school seemed to be out in the stands around the Quidditch field. I don't think I have dyslexia, but I have that fucking thing where, like, I'll read a word underneath another word by accident. That's what I get. Many students had binoculars. The seats might be raised high in the air, but it was still difficult to see what was going on sometimes. Ron and Hermione joined Neville, Seamus, and Dean, the West Ham fan, up in the top row. As a surprise for Harry, they had painted a large banner on one of the sheets Scabbers had ruined. It said, Potter for President. Okay. That's just weird. And Dean, who was good at drawing, had done a large Gryffindor lion underneath. Then Hermione had performed a tricky little charm so that the paint flashed different colors. Meanwhile, in the locker room, Harry and the rest of the team were changing into the scarlet Quidditch robes. Slytherin would be playing in green. Adieu. Wood cleared his throat for silence. Okay, men, he said. And women, said Chaser Angelina Johnson. And women, Wood agreed. This is it. The big one, said Fred Weasley. The one we've all been waiting for, said George. We know all of his speech by heart, Fred told Harry. We were on the team last year. Shut up, you two, said Wood. This is the best team Gryffindor has had in years. We're going to win. I know it. He glared at them all as if to say, or else. Right. It's time. Good luck, all of you. I'm getting hot. Give me a second. I gotta strip out of my fucking robe. There we go. Harry followed Fred and George out of the locker room and hoping his knees weren't going to give way, walked onto the field to loud cheers. Take it off. Madame Hooch was refereeing. She stood in the middle of the field waiting for the two teams, her broom in her hand. Now I want a nice, fair game. All of you, she said, once they'd all gathered around her. Harry noticed that she seemed to be speaking particularly to the Slytherin captain, Marcus Flint, a fifth year. Harry thought Flint looked as if he had some troll blood in him. Can you imagine if that was true? Just one of his ancestors fucked the troll and then made a half troll, half wizard. Ew. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw the fluttering banner high above, flashing Potter for president over the crowd. His heart skipped. He felt braver. Mount your brooms, please. Harry clambered onto his Nimbus 2000. Madame Hooch gave a loud blast on her silver whistle. 15 brooms rose up high, high to the air. They were off. And the quaffle is taken immediately by Angelina Johnson of Gryffindor. What an excellent chaser that girl is, and rather attractive, too. Jordan! Sorry, Professor. The Weasley twins' friend, Lee Jordan, was doing the commentary for the match, closely watched by Professor McGonagall. And she's really belting her along up there. A neat pass to Alicia Spinnet. A good find of Oliver Woods. Last year only a reserve. Back to Johnson. And no, the Slytherins have taken the quaffle. Slytherin captain Marcus Flint gains the quaffle. And off he goes. Flint flying like an eagle up there. He's going to score. No! Stopped by the excellent move by Gryffindor keeper Wood. And the Gryffindors take the quaffle. That's Chaser Katie Bell of Gryffindor there. Nice dive around Flint. Off up the field and ouch! That must have hurt. Hit in the back of the head by a bludger. Quaffle taken by the Slytherins. That's Adrian Pusey. Pusey. Speeding off toward the goalposts. But he's blocked by a second bludger. Sent his way by Fred or George Weasley. Can't tell which. Nice play by the Gryffindor beater anyway. And Johnson back in possession of the quaffle. A clear field ahead. And off she goes. She's really flying. Dodges a speeding bludger. The goalposts are ahead. Come on now, Angelina. Keeper Bletchley dives. Misses. Gryffindor score. Gryffindor's cheers filled the cold air with howls and moans from the Slytherins. Budge up there. Move along. Hagrid. Ron and Hermione squeezed together to give Hagrid enough space to join them. Been watching from me hat, said Hagrid, patting a large pair of binoculars around his neck. But it isn't the same as being in the crowd. No sign of the snitch yet, eh? Nope, said Ron. Harry hasn't had much to do yet. You're out of trouble, though. That's something, said Hagrid, raising his binoculars and peering skyward at the speck that was Harry. Way up above them, Harry was gliding over the game, squinting at about for some sign of the snitch. This was part of his and Wood's game plan. Keep out of the way until you catch sight of the snitch, Wood had said. We don't want you attacked before you have to be. When Angelina had scored, Harry had done a couple of loop-de-loops to let off his feelings. Now he was back to staring around for the snitch. Once he caught sight of a flash of gold, but it was just a reflection from one of the Weasleys' wristwatches. The Weasleys are that fucking poor, but they get gold on their watches? And once a bludger decided to come pelting his way, more like a cannonball than anything. But Harry dodged it, and Fred Weasley came chasing after it. All right there, Harry, he had time to yell as he beat the bludger furiously toward Marcus Flint. Slytherin in possession, Lee Jordan was saying. Chaser Pusey ducks two bludgers, two Weasleys, and Chaser Bell, and speeds toward the... Wait a moment, was that the snitch? A murmur ran through the crowd as Adrian Pusey dropped the quaffle, too busy looking over his shoulder at the flash of gold that had passed his left ear. Harry saw it. In a great rush of excitement, he dived down Downward after the streak of gold. Slytherin seeker Terrence Higgs had seen it too. Neck and neck they hurled toward the snitch. All the chasers seemed to have forgotten what they were supposed to be doing as they hung in midair to watch. Ron was faster than Higgs. Ron? Seriously? I think I got my dad in my head. Harry was faster than Higgs. Excuse me. He could see the little round ball, wings fluttering, darting up ahead. He put on an extra spurt of speed. Wham! A roar of rage echoed from the Gryffindors below. Marcus Flint had blocked Harry on purpose, and Harry's broom spun off course. Harry holding on for dear life. Foul! Screamed the Gryffindors. Wait a minute. So you can't hit another, like, I don't understand, because in the movies, like, fucking people are just bashing into each other as much as possible. It made it seem like it was kind of a free for all. You're not allowed to hit another player? All right. Madam Hooch spoke angrily to Flint and then ordered a free shot at the goalpost for Gryffindor. But in all the confusion, of course, the Golden Snitch, I'm going to call it the Golden Snatch from now on. The Golden Snatch had disappeared from sight again. Down in the stands, Dean Thomas was yelling, "Send him off, Red! Red card!" "What are you talking about, Dean?" said Ron. "Red card!" said Dean furiously. "In soccer, you get shown the red card and you're out of the game." "This isn't soccer, Dean," Ron reminded him. Hagrid, however, was on Dean's side. "They ought to change the rules. Flint could have knocked Harry out of the air." Lee Jordan was finding it difficult not to take sides. "So, after that obvious and disgusting bit of cheating, Jordan," growled Professor McGonagall. "I mean, after that open and revolting foul, Jordan, I'm warning you." All right. "Flint nearly kills the Gryffindor seeker, which could happen to anyone, I'm sure. So a penalty to Gryffindor taken by Spinnet, who puts it away. No trouble, and we continue play. Gryffindor still in possession." It was as Harry dodged another bludger, which went spinning dangerously past his head, that it happened. His broom gave a sudden, frightening lurch. For a split second, he thought he was going to fall. He gripped the broom tightly with both of his hands and knees. He never felt anything like that. It happened again. It was as though the broom was trying to buck him off. But Nimbus 2000s did not suddenly decide to buck their riders off. Harry tried to turn back toward the Gryffindor goalpost. He had half a mind to ask Wood to call timeout. And then he realized that his broom was completely out of his control. He couldn't turn it. He couldn't direct it at all. It was zigzagging through the air, and every now and then making violent swishing movements that almost unseated him. Lee was still commentating. "Slytherin in possession. Flint with the quaffle. Passes Spinnet. Passes Bell. Hit hard in the face by a bludger. Hope it broke his nose. Only joking, Professor. Slytherin score. Oh, no." The Slytherins were cheering. No one seemed to have noticed that Harry's broom was behaving strangely. It was carrying him slowly higher, away from the game, jerking and twitching as it went. "I don't know what Harry thinks he's doing," Hagrid mumbled. He stared through his binoculars. "If I didn't know better, I'd say he lost control of his broom. But he can't have." Suddenly, people were pointing up at Harry all over the stands. His broom had started to roll over and over, with him only just managing to hold on. And the whole crowd gasped. Harry's broom had given a wild jerk, and Harry swung off it. He was now dangling from it, holding on with only one hand. "Did something happen to it when Flint blocked him?" Seamus whispered. "Can't have," Hagrid said, his voice shaking. "Can't nothing interfere with a broomstick except powerful dark magic. No kid could do that to a Nimbus 2000. These words, Hermione seized Hagrid's binoculars, but instead of looking up at Harry, she started looking frantically at the crowd. "What are you doing?" moaned Ron, gray-faced. "I knew it," Hermione gasped. "Snape, look!" Ron grabbed the binoculars. Snape was in the middle of the stands opposite them, and his eyes fixed on Harry, and was muttering non-stop under his breath. "He's doing something. Jinxing the broom," said Hermione. "What should we do?" "Leave it to me." Before Ron could say another word, Hermione had disappeared. Ron turned the binoculars back on Harry. His broom was vibrating so hard it was almost impossible for him to hang on much longer. The whole crowd was on its feet, watching terrified as the Weasleys flew up to try and pull Harry safely onto one of their brooms. But it was no good. Every time they got near him, the broom would jump higher still. They dropped lower and circled beneath him, obviously hoping to catch him if he fell. Marcus Flint seized the quaffle and scored 5 times without anyone noticing. "Come on, Hermione," Ron muttered desperately. Hermione had fought her way across to the stand where Snape stood, and was now racing along the row behind him. She didn't even stop to say sorry as she knocked Professor Quirrell headfirst into the row in front. Reaching Snape, she crouched down, pulled out her wand, and whispered a few well-chosen words. "Really? You're not going to just write what the fuck they are?" Bright blue flames shot from her wand onto the hem of Snape's robes. It took perhaps 30 seconds for Snape to realize that he was on fire. A sudden yelp told her she had done her job. Scooping the fire off him into a little jar in her pocket, she scrambled back along the row. Snape would never know what had happened. It was enough. Up in the air, Harry was suddenly able to clamber back onto the broom. "Neville, you can look," Ron said. Neville had been sobbing into Hagrid's jacket for the last 5 minutes. Harry was speeding toward the ground when the crowd saw him clap his hand to his mouth as though he was about to be sick. He hit the field on all fours, coughed, and something gold fell into his hand. "I've got the snitch!" he shouted, waving it above his head, and the game ended in complete confusion. "He didn't catch it! He nearly swallowed it!" Flint was still howling 20 minutes later, but it made no difference. Harry hadn't broken any rules, and Lee Jordan was still happily shouting the results. Gryffindor had won by 170 points to 60. Harry heard of none of this, though. He was being made a cup of strong tea back in Hagrid's hut with Ron and Hermione. "It was Snape," Ron was explaining. "Hermione and I saw him. He was cursing a broomstick, muttering. He wouldn't take his eyes off you." "Rubbish," said Hagrid, who hadn't heard a word of what had gone on next to him in the stands. "Why would Snape do something like that?" Harry, Ron, and Hermione looked at one another, wondering what to tell him. Harry decided on the truth. "I found out something about him," he told Hagrid. "He tried to get past that 3-headed dog on Halloween. It bit him. We think he was trying to steal whatever it's guarding." Hagrid dropped the teapot. "How'd you know about Fluffy?" he said. "Fluffy? Yeah, he's mine. Bought him off a Greek chappie I met in the pub last year. Led him to Dumbledore to guard the..." "Yes," said Harry eagerly. "God damn it, Harry. Just stop saying shit. You'll let Hagrid do all the fucking damage." "Don't ask me anymore," said Hagrid gruffly. "That's top secret, that is." "But Snape's trying to steal it." "Rubbish," said Hagrid again. "Snape's a Hogwarts teacher. He do nothing of the sort." "So why did he just try and kill Harry?" cried Hermione. The afternoon's events certainly seemed to have changed her mind about Snape. "I know a jinx when I see one, Hagrid. I've read all about them. You've got to keep eye contact, and Snape wasn't blinking at all. I saw him." "I'm telling you, you're wrong," said Hagrid hotly. "I don't know why Harry's broom acted like that, but Snape wouldn't try and kill a student. Now, listen to me, all 3 of you. You meddle in things that don't concern you. It's dangerous. You forget that dog, and you forget what's guarding. That's between Professor Dumbledore and Nicholas Flamel." "Aha!" said Harry. "So there's someone called Nicholas Flamel that's involved, is there?" Hagrid looked furious with himself. Let's see. Yeah, we're still making really good time. Chapter 12. The Mirror of Erised. Christmas was coming. One morning in mid-December, Hogwarts woke to find himself covered in several feet of snow. The lake froze solid, and the Weasley twins were punished, hear this, for bewitching several snowballs as they followed Quirrell around, bouncing off the back of his turban. Think about that for 1 second. The few owls that managed to battle their way through the stormy sky to deliver mail had to be nursed back to health by Hagrid before they could fly off again. It doesn't take much to think about it, Kateri. Like it's pretty funny that fucking Voldemort is just. God damn! I will kill you, Weasleys. No one could wait for the holidays to start. While the Gryffindor common room and the Great Hall had roaring fires, the drafty corridors had become icy, and a bitter wind rattled the windows in the classrooms. Worst of all were Professor Snape's classes down in the dungeons, where their breath rose in a mist before them, and they kept as close as possible to their hot cauldrons. I do feel so sorry, said Draco Malfoy, one potions class, for all those people who have to stay at Hogwarts to scoop for Christmas because they're not wanted at home. He was looking over at Harry as he spoke. Crabbe and Goyle chuckled. Harry, who was measuring out powdered spine of lionfish, ignored them. Malfoy had been even more unpleasant than usual since the Quidditch match. Disgusted that the Slytherins had lost, he had tried to get everyone laughing at how a wide-mouthed tree frog would be replacing Harry as Seeker next. Then he realized that nobody found this funny, because they were all so impressed as the way Harry had managed to stay on his bucking broomstick. So Malfoy, jealous and angry, had gone back to taunting Harry about having no proper family. What a dick. It was true that Harry wasn't going back to Privet Drive for Christmas. Professor McGonagall had come around the week before, making a list of students who would be staying for the holidays, and Harry had signed up at once. He didn't feel sorry for himself at all. This would probably be the best Christmas he'd ever had. Ron and his brothers were staying too, because Mr. and Mrs. Weasley were going to Romania to visit Charlie. When they left the dungeons at the end of Potions, they found a large fir tree blocking the corridor ahead, two enormous feet sticking out the bottom, and a loud puffing sound told them that Hagrid was behind it. Hi, Hagrid. Want any help? Ron. What are you going to do, Ron? Like, if Hagrid's huffing and puffing, what the fuck are you going to do? Well, you can win Wingardium Leviosa, I guess. All right, prove me wrong, goddammit. Ron asked, sticking his head through the branches. Nah, I'm all right, thanks, Ron. Would you mind moving out of the way? Came Malfoy's cold drawl from behind them. Are you trying to earn some extra money, Weasley? Hoping to be gamekeeper yourself when you leave Hogwarts? I suppose that hut of Hagrid's must seem like a palace compared to what your family's used to. Ron dived at Malfoy just as Snape came up the stairs. Weasley! Ron let go of the front of Malfoy's robes. He was provoked, Professor Snape, said Hagrid, sticking his huge hairy face out from behind the tree. Malfoy was insulting his family. Be that as it may, fighting is against Hogwarts rules, Hagrid, said Snape silkily. 5 points from Gryffindor, Weasley. I'd be grateful it isn't more. Move along, all of you. Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle pushed roughly past the tree, scattering needles everywhere and smirking. I'll get him, said Ron, grinding his teeth at Malfoy's back. One of these days, I'll get him. I hate them both, said Harry. Malfoy and Snape. Come on, cheer up. It's nearly Christmas, said Hagrid. Tell you what, come with me and see the Great Hall. Looks a treat. So the three of them followed Hagrid and his tree off to the Great Hall, where Professor McGonagall and Professor Fuckstick were busy with the Christmas decorations. Ah, Hagrid, the last tree. Put it in the far corner, could you? The hall looked spectacular. Festoons of holly and mistletoe hung all around the walls, and no less than 12 towering Christmas trees stood around the room, some sparkling with tiny icicles, some glittering with hundreds of candles. How many days you got left till your holidays? Hagrid asked. Just one, said Hermione. And that reminds me, Harry, Ron, we've got half an hour before lunch. We should be in the library. Oh, yeah, you're right, said Ron, tearing his eyes away from Professor Fuckstick, who had golden baubles blossoming out of his wand and was trailing them over the branches of the new tree. Library, said Hagrid, following them out. Just before the holidays? Bit keen, aren't you? Oh, we're not working, Harry told him brightly. Ever since you mentioned Nicholas Flamel, we've been trying to find out who he is. You what? Hagrid looked shocked. Listen here, I've told you, drop it. It's nothing to you what the dog's guarding. We just want to know who Nicholas Flamel is, that's all. said Hermione. Unless you'd like to tell us and save us the trouble, Harry added. We must have been through hundreds of books already. We can't find him anywhere. Just give us a hint. I know I've tried. I know I've read his name somewhere. I'm saying nothing, said Hagrid flatly. Just have to find out for ourselves then, said Ron, as they left Hagrid looking disgruntled and hurried off to the library. By the way, at this point, Hagrid should be like telling Dumbledore, be like, Professor Dumbledore, I fucked up. The kids came in, I said some shit, now they're trying to know who the fuck Nicholas Flamel is. Just in case. That's what Hagrid should be doing. Not just, don't tell anyone. Like, you were expelled, and Dumbledore was like, no, you stay here, you're good, we're okay. He's not going to fire you, you fucking oaf. They had indeed been searching books for Flamel's name ever since Hagrid had let it slip, because how else were they going to find out what Snape was trying to steal? The trouble was, it was very hard to know where to begin, not knowing what Flamel might have done to get himself into a book. He wasn't in great wizards of the 20th century or notable magic names of our time. I find it hard to believe he's not in great wizards of the 20th century. I mean, that would presume they would lead up to the 20th century, right? He was missing, too, from important modern magical discoveries and a study of recent developments in wizardry. So I guess that's what it is. He's so old that, like, no one has written about him, but a chocolate frog card is relevant enough to keep him on it. Like, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't fucking get it. It's like having Babe Ruth stricken from all the baseball records, but you still, like, everyone has, like, a Babe Ruth card. Like, it's so weird. And then, of course, there was the sheer size of the library. Tens of thousands of books, thousands of shelves, hundreds of narrow rows. Hermione took out a list of subjects and titles she had decided to search, while Ron strode off down a row of books and started pulling them off the shelves at random. See, here's the thing. If Harry was a fat fuck, he would have been reminded of Nicholas Flamel a long time ago. He would have been like, oh, it's, time for a chocolate frog, and been like, undoubtedly getting another Dumbledore. See, being fat helps. Harry wandered over to the restricted section. He had been wondering for a while if Flamel wasn't somewhere in there. Unfortunately, you needed a special signed note from one of the teachers to look at any of the restricted books, and he knew he'd never get one. These were the books containing powerful dark magic, never taught at Hogwarts, and only read by older students studying advanced defense against the dark arts. What are you looking for, boy? Nothing, said Harry. Madame Pince, the librarian, brandished a feather duster at him. You'd better get out then. Go on, out! Wishing he'd been a bit quicker at thinking up some story. What could you say? I want to get a restricted book. No, fuck off. All right, that's the end of that conversation. Harry left the library. He, Ron, and Hermione had already agreed they better not ask Madame Pince where they could find Flamel. Why not? They were sure she'd be able to tell them, but they couldn't risk Snape hearing what they were up to. So don't do it when Snape's around. Jesus Christ. You literally have a librarian whose sole purpose is to help you find a fucking book. Harry waited outside in the corridor to see if the other two had found anything, but he wasn't very hopeful. They had been looking for 2 weeks, after all, but as they had only had odd moments between lessons, it wasn't surprising they'd found nothing. When they really needed was a nice long search without Madame Pince breathing down their necks. Fucking fucks. I know, like a Rolodex. Like, I get they don't have the internet. I get that. But, like, there's not a spell that'd be like, Revelio, fucker, books, book Revelio. Come on. You can't do a wizarding Google search for Nicholas Flamel and have a book just... 5 minutes later, Ron and Hermione joined him, shaking their heads. They went off to lunch. You will keep looking while I'm away, won't you? Said Hermione. And send me an owl if you find anything. And you can ask your parents if they know who Flamel is, said Ron. It'd be safe to ask them. Very safe, as they're both dentists, said Hermione. So Ron has the brilliant idea of having Hermione ask her parents, but he doesn't think maybe just asking his parents? Once the holidays had started, Ron and Harry were having too much a good time to think about Flamel. They had the dormitory to themselves, and the common room was far emptier than usual, so they were able to get the good armchairs by the fire. They sat by the hour, eating anything they could spear on a toasting fork. Bread, English muffins, marshmallows, and plotting ways of getting Malfoy expelled, which were fun to talk about even if they wouldn't work. Control F. Ron also started teaching Harry wizard chess. This was exactly like Muggle chess, except that the figures were alive. So not at all exactly like Muggle chess, which made it a lot like directing troops in battle. Ron's set was very old and battered. Like everything else he owned, it had once belonged to someone else in his family, in this case, his grandfather. However, old chessmen weren't a drawback at all. Ron knew them so well he never had trouble getting them to do what he wanted. Harry played with chessmen Seamus Finnegan had lent him, and they didn't trust him at all. He wasn't a very good player yet, and they kept shouting different bits of advice at him, which was confusing. Don't send me there, can't you see us knight? Send him, we can afford to lose him. What a dick chess piece. Just like, oi, kill him, he's not worthy. On Christmas Eve, Harry went to bed looking forward to the next day for the food and the fun, but not expecting any presents at all. He lacked presents. When he woke early in the morning, however, the first thing he saw was a small pile of packages at the foot of his bed. Merry Christmas, said Ron sleepily as Harry scrambled out of bed and pulled on his bathrobe. You too, said Harry. Will you look at this? I've got some presents. What did you expect, turnips? Said Ron, turning into his own pile, which was a lot bigger than Harry's. Harry picked up the top parcel. It was wrapped in thick brown paper, and scrawled across it was, To Harry from Hagrid. Inside was a roughly cut wooden flute. Hagrid had obviously whittled it himself. Harry blew it. It sounded a bit like an owl. A second, very small parcel contained a note. We received your message and enclosed your Christmas presents. From Uncle Vernon and Petunia. Taped to the note was a 50-pence piece. That's friendly, said Harry. Ron was fascinated by the 50 pence. Weird, he said. What a shape. This is money? You can keep it, said Harry, laughing at how pleased Ron was. Hagrid and my aunts and uncle. So who sent these? I think I know who that one's from, said Ron, turning a bit pink and pointing to a very lumpy parcel. My mum told her you didn't expect any presents, and oh no, he groaned. She's made you a Weasley sweater. Harry had torn open the parcel to find a thick, hand-knitted sweater in emerald green and a large box of homemade fudge. Every year she makes us a sweater, said Ron, unwrapping his own, and mine's always maroon. What a maroon! That's really nice of her, said Harry, trying the fudge, which was very tasty. His next present also contained candy. A large box of chocolate frogs from Hermione. Well, about goddamn time. This this only left one parcel. Harry picked it up and felt it. It was very light. He unwrapped it. Something fluid and silvery gray went slithering to the floor where it lay in gleaming folds. Ron gasped. I've heard of those, he said in a hushed voice, dropping the box of every flavor beans he'd gotten from Hermione. I think it's interesting that, like, the daughter of dentists decided to give them candy. Like, here, I need you to be future customers for my parents. If that's what I think it is, they're really rare and really valuable. What is it? Harry picked the shining silvery cloth off the floor. It was strange to the touch, like water woven into material. It's an invisibility cloak, said Ron, a look of awe on his face. Aw. I'm sure it is. Try it on. Harry threw the cloak around his shoulders, and Ron gave a yell. It is! Look down! Look down! Harry looked down at his feet, and they were gone. He dashed to the mirror. Sure enough, his reflection looked back at him, just his head suspended in midair, his body completely invisible. He pulled the cloak over his head, and his reflection vanished completely. There's a note, said Ron suddenly. A note fell out of it. That's a good point. How the fuck does anyone? I mean, I think like you can make an invisibility cloak stuff. I think it just is. You have to have some severe advanced magic. Like as we find out later in the series, his cloak is like a true invisibility cloak, whereas you can make a cloak invisible, but it if it tears or is patched and old, it can be kind of not like patches of your tit and whatever can fucking peek through. Harry pulled off the cloak and seized the letter. Written in narrow, loopy writing he had never seen before were the following words. Your father left this in my possession before he died, and it's time it was returned to you. Use it well. A very Merry Christmas to you. Hi, Dino. There was no signature. Harry stared at the note. Ron was admiring the cloak. I'd give anything for one of these, he said. Anything. What's the matter? Nothing, said Harry. He felt very strange. Who had sent the cloak? Had it really once belonged to his father? Yes. Before he could say or think anything else, the dormitory door was flung open and Fred and George quickly bounded in. Harry stuffed the cloak quickly out of sight. He didn't feel like sharing with anyone else yet. Merry Christmas! Hey, look, Harry's got a Weasley sweater too. Fred and George were wearing blue sweaters, one with a large yellow F on it, the other a G. How great would it be if they swapped them, just to really fuck with people? Harry's is better than ours, though, said Fred, holding up Harry's sweater. She obviously makes more of an effort if you're not family. Why aren't you wearing yours, Ron? George demanded. Come on, get it on. They're lovely and warm. I hate maroon, Ron moaned half-heartedly as he pulled it over his head. You haven't got a letter on yours, George observed. Suppose she thinks you don't forget your name. But we're not stupid. We know we're called Gred and Folge. What's all this noise? Percy Weasley stuck his head through the door, looking disapprovingly. He had clearly gotten halfway through unwrapping his presents as he too carried a lumpy sweater over his arm, which Fred seized. P for prefect! Get it on, Percy! Come on, we're all wearing ours. Even Harry got one. I don't want, said Percy thickly, as the twins forced the sweater over his head, knocking his glasses askew. Pot askew. You're not sitting with the prefects today either, said George. Christmas is a time for family. They frog marched Percy from the room, his arms pinned to his side by his sweater. Knitting class and crochet class, provided by Stephanie. I love it. No, Steph's good at that. Like I got my Batman blanket. All right, Dino, you are cutting off the circulation of my leg, buddy. Thank you. Harry had never in all his life had such a Christmas dinner. 100 fat roast turkeys, mountains of roast and boiled potatoes, platters of chipolatas. The hell is a chipolata? Is it a lot of chips? What the fuck is it? Tureens of buttered peas, silver boats of thick, rich gravy and cranberry sauce, and stacks of wizard crackers every few feet along the table. These fantastic party favors were nothing like the feeble muggle ones that Dursleys usually bought, with their little plastic toys and their flimsy paper hats inside. Harry pulled a wizard cracker with Fred, and it didn't just bang, it went off with a blast like a cannon and engulfed them all in a cloud of blue smoke, while from the inside exploded a rear admiral's hat and several live white mice. Why? Why are there just fucking rodents everywhere? Dino, get it. Up at the high table, Dumbledore had swapped his pointed hats for a flowered bonnet and was chuckling merrily at a joke Professor Fuckstick had just read him. Flaming Christmas puddings followed the turkey. Percy nearly broke his tooth on a silver sickle embroidered in embedded in his slice. Dino, come on, off. Harry watched Hagrid getting redder and redder in the face as he called for more wine, finally kissing Professor McGonagall on the cheek, who, to Harry's amazement, giggled and blushed, her top hat lopsided. Damn, the fucking faculty is getting fucked up. I love it. See, that's when like Harry should go and ask about Nicholas Flamel. That's when he should have done it. Hey Hagrid, who's Nicholas Flamel? Ah, let me tell you about Nicholas Flamel. That son of a bitch owes me money. When Harry finally left the table, he was laden down with a stack of things out of the crackers, including a pack of non-explodable luminous balloons, a grow-your-own warts kit, and his own new wizard chess set. The white mice had disappeared, and Harry had a nasty feeling they were going to end up at Mrs. Norris' Christmas dinner. Harry and the Weasleys spent a happy. Thanks, CJ. I'm glad I make myself laugh. I'm glad I like laughing, especially recently. I've been having a rough couple fucking days. Good to laugh. Harry and the Weasleys spent a happy afternoon having a furious snowball fight on the grounds. Then, cold, wet, and gasping for breath, they returned to the fire in the Gryffindor common room, where Harry broke in his new chess set by losing spectacularly to Ron. He suspected he wouldn't have lost so badly if Percy hadn't tried to help him out so much. After a meal of turkey sandwiches, crumpets, trifle, and Christmas cake, everyone felt too full and sleepy to do much before bed except sit and watch Percy chase Fred and George all over Gryffindor Tower because they'd stolen his prefect badge. It had been Harry's best Christmas day ever, yet something had been nagging at the back of his mind all day. Not until he climbed into bed was he free to think about it, the invisibility cloak and whoever had sent it. Ron, full of turkey and cake, and with nothing mysterious to bother him, fell asleep almost as soon as he'd drawn the curtains of his four-poster. Harry leaned over the side of his own bed and pulled the cloak out from under it. His father's. This had been his father's. He let the material flow over his hands, smoother than silk, light as air. Use it well, the note had said. He had to try it now. He slipped out of bed and wrapped the cloak around himself. Looking down at his legs, he saw only moonlight and shadows. It was a very funny feeling. Use it well. Pause. So Dumbledore is like, I really want this kid to find out about Nicholas Flamel. Like he's kind of like, go solve the mystery, do it. Like this is what I want you to do. Why? Couldn't he just written Harry a fucking note saying like, oh yeah, dude, my old homie is Nicholas Flamel. Like he did this, he made the Sorcerer's Stone because I need you to solve this fucking riddle. Don't add a fucking little PS. Use it well. By the way, stupid. Yeah. Okay. Suddenly, Harry felt wide awake. The whole of Hogwarts was open to him in this cloak. Excitement flowed through him as he stood there in the dark and silence. You could go anywhere in this, anywhere, and Filch would never know. Ron grunted in his sleep. Should Harry wake him? Something held him back. His father's cloak. He felt that at this time, the first time, he wanted to use it alone. Ron grunted. I'm sorry. He crept out of the dormitory, down the stairs, across the common room, and fucked off through the portrait hall. Who's there? Squawked the fat lady. Harry said nothing. He walked quickly down the corridor. Where should he go? He stopped, his heart racing at thought. And then it came to him. The restricted section of the library. He'd be able to read as long as he liked, as long as it took to find out who Flamel was. He set off, drawing the invisibility cloak tight around him as he walked. The library was pitch black and very eerie. Harry lit a lamp to see his way along the rows of books. The lamp looked as if it was floating along in midair. Even though Harry could feel his arms supporting it, the sight of him gave him the creeps. So I guess if we put it under the cloak, it would just illuminate him, but not around him. Okay. All right. Just trying to find the specifications and limitations of magic. The restricted section was right at the back of the library. Stepping carefully over the rope that separated those books from the rest of the library, he held up his lamp to read the titles. They didn't tell him much. Their peeling, faded gold letters spelled words in languages Harry couldn't understand. Some had no title at all. One book had a dark stain on it that looked horribly like blood. Ah, prune juice. The hairs on the back of Harry's neck prickled. Maybe he was imagining it, maybe not, but he thought a faint whispering was coming from the books, as though they knew someone was there who shouldn't be. He had to start somewhere. Setting the lamp down carefully on the floor, he looked along the bottom shelf for an interesting-looking book. A large black and silver volume caught his eye. He pulled it out with difficulty because it was very heavy, and balancing it on his knee, let it fall open. A piercing, blood-curdling shriek split the silence. The book was screaming. Harry snapped it shut, but the shriek went on and on, one high, unbroken, ear-splitting note. He stumbled backward and knocked over his lamp, which went out at once. Panicking, he heard footsteps coming down the corridor outside, stuffing the shrieking book back on the shelf. He ran for it. He passed Filch in the doorway. Filch's pale, wild eyes looked straight through him, and Harry slipped under Filch's outstretched arm and streaked up to the corridor, the book's shrieks still ringing in his ears. He came to a sudden halt. Hey, Jess. In front of a tall suit of armor. He had been so busy getting away from the library, he hadn't paid attention to where he was going. Perhaps because it was dark, he didn't recognize where he was at all. There was a suit of armor near the kitchens, he knew, but he must be 5 floors above there. Hang on, I gotta. There's dialogue, but I need to fucking see who's saying it. You asked me to come directly to you, Professor, if anyone was wandering around at night. Somebody's been in the library. Restricted section. Harry felt the blood drain out of his face. Wherever he was, Filch must know a shortcut, because his soft, greasy voice was getting nearer. And to his horror, it was Snape who replied, "The restricted section. When they can't be far, we'll catch them." Harry stood rooted to the spot as Filch and Snape came around the corner ahead. They couldn't see him, of course, but it was a narrow corridor, and if they came much nearer, they knocked right into him. The cloak didn't stop him from being solid. He backed away as quietly as he could. A door stood ajar to his left. It was his only hope. He squeezed through it, holding his breath, trying not to move it. And to his relief, he managed to get inside the room without their noticing anything. They walked straight past, and Harry leaned against the wall, breathing deeply, listening to their footsteps dying away. That had been close, very close. It was a few seconds before he noticed anything about the room he had hidden in. It looked like an unused classroom. The dark shapes of desks and chairs were piled against the walls, and there was an upturned waste paper basket. Propped against the wall facing him was something that didn't look as if it belonged there. Something that looked as if it had just been put there to keep it out of the way. It was a magnificent mirror, as high as the ceiling, with an ornate gold frame standing on 2 clawed feet. There was an inscription carved around the top. Erisid, Stra, Erhu, Oit, Ubi, Kerfru, Oit, on Wosi. Which means, basically, I can't read backwards right now. But that's what it is. So whatever the fuck the phrase is in backwards. Like, Erisid is desire. Mirror of desire. His panic fading now that there was no sound of Filch and Snape, Harry moved nearer to the mirror. Nearer to the mirror. Wanting to look at himself but see no reflection again, he stepped in front of it. He had to clap his hands to his mouth to stop him from screaming. He whirled around. His heart was pounding far more curiously than when the book had screamed. For he had not only seen himself in the mirror, but a whole crowd of people standing right behind him. But the room was empty. Breathing very fast, he turned slowly back to the mirror. There he was, reflected in it, white and scared looking, and there, reflected behind him, were at least 10 others. Harry looked over his shoulder, but still no one was there. Or were they all invisible too? Was he in fact in a room full of invisible people, and this mirror's trick was that it reflected them, invisible or not? He looked in the mirror again. A woman standing right behind his reflection was smiling at him and waving. He reached out a hand and felt the air behind him. If she was really there, he'd touch her. The reflections were so close together, but he felt only air. She and the others existed only in the mirror. She was a very pretty woman. She had dark red hair and her eyes. Her eyes are just like mine, Harry thought, edging a little closer to the glass. Bright green, exactly the same shape. But then he noticed that she was crying, smiling but crying at the same time. The tall, thin, black-haired man standing next to her put his arm around her. He wore glasses, and his hair was very untidy. It stuck up at the back just as Harry's did. Harry was so close to the mirror now that his nose was nearly touching that of his reflection. "Mom," he whispered. "Dad?" And they just looked at him, smiling. And slowly Harry looked into the faces of the other people in the mirror and saw other pairs of green eyes like his, other noses like his, even a little old man who looked as though he had Harry's knobbly knees. Harry was looking at his family for the first time in his life. The Potters smiled and waved as Harry and he stared hungrily back at them. His eyes pressed flat against the glass as though he was hoping to fall right through it and reach them. A powerful kind of ache inside them. Half joy, half terrible sadness. How long he stood there he didn't know. The reflections did not fade, and he looked and looked until a distant noise brought him back to his senses. He couldn't stay here. He had to find his way back to bed. He tore his eyes away from his mother's face, whispered, "I'll come back," and hurried back from the room. Sorry, guys, that just... "You could have woken me up," said Ron crossly. "You can come tonight. I'm going back. I want to show you the mirror." "I'd like to see your mom and dad," Ron said eagerly. "And I want to see all your family, all the Weasleys. You'll be able to show me your older brothers and everyone." "You could see them any old time," said Ron. "Just come around my house this summer. Anyway, maybe it only shows dead people. Same about not finding Flamel, though. Have some bacon or something. Why aren't you eating anything?" Harry couldn't eat. He had seen his parents and would be seeing them again tonight. He had almost forgotten about Flamel. It didn't seem very important anymore. Who cared what the three-headed dog was guarding? What did it matter if Snape stole it, really? "You all right?" said Ron. "You look old." "Odd. Excuse me. You look old." What Harry feared most was that he might not be able to find the mirror room again. With Ron covered in the cloak too, they had to walk much more slowly the next night. They tried retracing Harry's route from the library, wandering around the dark passage for nearly an hour. "I'm freezing," said Ron. "Let's forget it and go back." "No!" Harry hissed. "I know it's here somewhere." They passed the ghost of a tall witch gliding in the opposite direction, but saw no one else. Just as Ron started moaning that his feet were dead with cold, Harry spot. "Are you not wearing slippers, motherfucker?" Harry spotted the suit of armor. "It's here, just here. Yes!" They pushed the door open. Harry dropped the cloak from around his shoulders and ran to the mirror. There they were. His mother and father beamed at the sight of him. "See," Harry whispered. "I can't see anything. Look at them all. There are loads of them. I can only see you. Look at it properly. Go on, stand where I am." Harry fucked off, but with Ron in front of the mirror, he couldn't see his family anymore. Just Ron in his paisley pajamas. Ron, though, was staring transfixed as his Ron was staring transfixed at his image. "Look at me." Can you see all your family standing around you? No, I'm alone. But I'm different. I look older. And I'm head boy. What? I am. I'm wearing that badge like Bill used to. And I'm holding the house cup and the Quidditch cup. I'm Quidditch captain too. Ron tore his eyes away from the splendid sight to look excitedly at Harry. Do you think this mirror shows the future? How can it? All my family are dead. Let me have another look. You had it to yourself all last night. Give me a bit more time. You're only holding the Quidditch cup, what's interesting about that? I want to see my parents. Don't push me. Sudden noise outside the corner put an end to their discussion. They hadn't realized how loudly they had been talking. Quick! Ron threw the cloak back over them as the luminous eyes of Mrs. Norris came round the door. Ron and Harry stood quite still, both thinking the same thing. Did the cloak work on cats? After what seemed an age, she turned and left. This isn't safe. She might have gone for Filch. I bet she heard us. Come on. And Ron pulled Harry out of the room. The snow still hadn't melted the next morning. Want to play chess, Harry? Said Ron. No. Why don't we go down and visit Hagrid? No, you go. I know what you're thinking about, Harry. That mirror. Don't go back tonight. Why not? I don't know. I've just got a bad feeling about it. And anyway, you've had so many close shaves already. Filch, Snape, and Mrs. Norris are wandering around. So what if they can't see you? What if they walk into you? What if you knock something over? You sound like Hermione. I'm serious, Harry. Don't go. But Harry only had one thought in his head, which was to get back in front of the mirror, and Ron wasn't going to stop him. The third night he found his way more quickly than before. He was walking so fast he knew he was making more noise than was wise, but he didn't meet anyone. And there was his mother and father smiling at him again, and one of his grandfathers nodding happily. Harry sank down and sat on the floor in front of the mirror. There was nothing to stop him from staying here all night with his family. Nothing at all. Except, so, back again, Harry. Harry felt as though his insides had turned to ice. He looked behind him. Sitting on one of the desks by the wall was none other than Albus Dumbledore. Harry must have walked straight past him, so desperate to get to the mirror he hadn't noticed him. I didn't see you, sir. Strange how nearsighted being invisible can make you, said Dumbledore, and Harry was relieved to see that he was smiling. So, said Dumbledore, slipping off his desk to sit on the floor with Harry, you, like hundreds before you, have discovered the delights of the Mirror of Erised. I didn't know it was called that, sir. But I expect you've realized by now what it does. It shows me my family. And it showed your friend Ron himself as head boy. How did you know? I don't need a cloak to become invisible, said Dumbledore gently. Now, can you think what the Mirror of Erised shows us all? Harry shook his head. Let me explain. The happiest man on earth would be able to use the Mirror of Erised like a normal mirror. That is, he would look into it and see himself exactly as he is. Does that help? Harry thought. Then he said slowly, it shows us what we want. Whatever we want. Yes? No, said Dumbledore quietly. It shows us nothing more or less than the deepest, most desperate desire of our hearts. You, who have never known your family, see them standing around you. Ronald Weasley, who has always been overshadowed by his brothers, sees himself standing alone, the best of all of them. However, this mirror will give us neither knowledge or truth. Men have wasted away before it, entranced by what they have seen or been driven mad, not knowing if what it shows is real or even possible. The mirror will be moved to a new home tomorrow, Harry, and I must ask you not to go looking for it again. If you ever do run across it, you will now be prepared. It does not do to dwell on dreams and forget to live. Remember that. Now, why don't you put that admirable cloak back on and get off to bed? See, he's hinting like, I'll see you later in the, when we're gonna, when I'm gonna save you from Quirrell and shit. Harry stood up. Sir, Professor Dumbledore, can I ask you something? Obviously, you've just done so, Professor Dumbledore smiled. You may ask me one more thing, however. What do you see when you look in the mirror? I see myself holding a pair of thick woolen socks. Harry stared. One can never have enough socks, said Dumbledore. Another Christmas has come and gone, and I didn't get a single pair. People who insist on giving me books. It was only when he was back in bed that it struck Harry that Dumbledore might not have been quite truthful. But then, he thought, as he shoved Scabbers off his pillow, then quite a personal question. Let me see if I can do this in 20 minutes. Yeah, I think I can. Chapter 13. Nicholas Flamel. Fucking finally. Dumbledore had convinced Harry not to go looking for the Mirror of Erised again, and for the rest of the Christmas holidays, the invisibility cloak stayed folded at the bottom of his trunk. Harry wished he could forget what he'd seen in the mirror as easily, but he couldn't. He started having nightmares over and over again. He dreamed about his parents disappearing in a flash of green light, while a high voice cackled with laughter. You see, Dumbledore was right. Oh, sorry. You see, Dumbledore was right. That mirror could drive you mad, said Ron, when Harry told him about these dreams. Hermione, who came back the day before term started, took a different view of things. She was torn between horror at the idea of Harry being out of bed, roaming the school 3 nights in a row, if Filch had caught you, and disappointment that he hadn't at least found out who Nicholas Flamel was. They had almost given up hope of ever finding Flamel in a library book, even though Harry was still sure he'd read the name somewhere. Once term had started, they were back to skimming through the books for 10 minutes during their breaks. Harry had even less time than the other two, because Quidditch practice had started again. Wood was working the team harder than ever. Even the endless rain that had replaced the snow couldn't dampen his spirits. The Weasleys complained that Wood was becoming a fanatic, but Harry was on Wood's side. If they won their next match against Hufflepuff, they would overtake Slytherin in the House Championship for the first time in 7 years. Quite apart from wanting to win, Harry found that he had fewer nightmares when he was tired out from training. Then, during one particularly wet and muddy practice session, Wood gave the team a bit of bad news. He'd just gotten very angry with the Weasleys, who kept dive-bombing each other and pretending to fall off their brooms. Will you stop messing around? He yelled. That's exactly the sort of thing we'll lose us the match. Snape's refereeing this time, and he'll be looking for any excuse to knock points off Gryffindor. George Weasley really did fall off his broom at those words. Snape's refereeing, he spluttered through a mouthful of mud. When's he ever refereed a Quidditch match? He's not going to be fair if we might overtake Slytherin. The rest of the team landed next to George to complain too. It's not my fault, said Wood. We've just got to make sure we play a clean game so Snape hasn't got an excuse to pick on us. Which was all very well, thought Harry, but he had another reason for not wanting Snape near him when he was playing Quidditch. The rest of the team hung back to talk to no one. The rest of the team hung back to talk to one another, as usual at the end of the practice. But Harry headed straight back to the Gryffindor common room, where he found Ron and Hermione playing chess. Chess was the only thing Hermione ever lost at, something Harry and Ron thought was very good for her. Don't talk to me for a moment, said Ron, when Harry sat down next to him. I need to concentrate. He caught sight of Harry's face. What's the matter with you? You look terrible. Speaking quietly so that no one else could hear, Harry told the other two about Snape's sudden, sinister desire to be a Quidditch referee. Don't play, said Hermione at once. Say you're ill, said Ron. Pretend to break your leg, Hermione suggested. Really break your leg, said Ron. There's two types of friends that Harry has. One's practical, one's an idiot. I can't, said Harry. There isn't a reserve seeker. If I back out, Gryffindor can't play at all. At that moment, Neville toppled into the common room. How he had managed to climb through the portrait hall was anyone's guess, because his legs had been stuck together with what they recognized at once as the leg locker curse. He must have had to bunny hop all the way up to Gryffindor Tower. Everyone fell over laughing except Hermione, who leaped up and performed the counter curse. Neville's legs sprang apart, and he got to his feet trembling. What happened? Hermione asked him, leading him over to sit with Harry and Ron. Malfoy, said Neville shakily. I met him outside the library. He said he'd been looking for someone to practice it on. Go to Professor McGonagall, Hermione urged Neville. Report him. Neville shook his head. I don't want any more trouble, he mumbled. You've got to stand up to him, Neville, said Ron. He's used to walking all over people, but that's no reason to lie down in front of him and make it easier. There's no need to tell me I'm not brave enough to be in Gryffindor. Malfoy's already done that, Neville choked out. Harry felt in the pocket of his robes and pulled out a chocolate frog, the very last one from the box Hermione had given him for Christmas. He gave it to Neville, who looked as though he might cry. You're worth 12 of Malfoy, Harry said. The Sorting Hat chose you for Gryffindor, didn't it? And where's Malfoy? In stinking Slytherin. I've got that much. Yeah, maybe we'll be finished. I don't think so. Maybe two more. Neville's lips twitched in a weak smile as he unwrapped the frog. Thanks, Harry. I think I'll go to bed. Do you want the card? You collect them, didn't you? As Neville fucked off, Harry looked at the famous wizard card again. Dumbledore again, he said. He was the first one I ever... He gasped. He stared at the back of the card. Then he looked up at Ron and Hermione. I found him, he whispered. I found Flamel. I told you I read the name somewhere before. I read it on the train coming here. Listen to this. Dumbledore is particularly famous for his defeat of the Dark Wizard Grindelwald in 1945, for the discovery of the 12 uses of dragon's blood, and his work on alchemy with his partner Nicholas Flamel. Hermione jumped to her feet. She hadn't looked so excited since they'd gotten back the marks for their very first piece of homework. Stay there, she said, and she fucked off to the stairs of the girls' dormitories. Harry and Ron barely had time to exchange mystified looks before she was dashing back, an enormous old book in her arms. I never thought to look in here, she whispered excitedly. I got this out of the library weeks ago for a bit of light reading. Light? Said Ron, but Hermione told him to be quiet until she looked something up, and started flicking frantically through the pages, muttering to herself. At last, she found what she was looking for. I knew it! I knew it! Are we allowed to speak yet? Said Ron grumpily. Hermione ignored him. Nicholas Flamel, she whispered dramatically, is the only known maker of the Sorcerer's Stone. This didn't have quite the effect she expected. The what? Said Harry and Ron. Oh, fuck, honestly, don't you two read? Look, read that there. She pushed the book toward them, and Harry and Ron read. Do I want to wait for Jess? Come on, Jess. Hurry it up. I'll read this part. I'm sure she knows it. The ancient study of alchemy is concerned with the making of the Sorcerer's Stone, a legendary substance with astonishing powers. The stone will transform any metal into pure gold. It also produces the elixir of life, which will make the drinker immortal. There have been many reports of the Sorcerer's Stone over the centuries, but the only stone currently in existence belongs to Mr. Nicholas Flamel, the noted alchemist and opera lover. It's such a weird thing to put in. Mr. Flamel, who celebrated his 665th birthday last year, enjoys a quiet life in Devon with his wife, Pernell, 658. See, said Hermione when Harry and Ron had finished, the dog must be guarding Flamel's Sorcerer's Stone. I bet he asked Dumbledore to keep it safe for him because they're friends and he knew someone was after it. That's why he wanted the stone moved out of Gringotts. A stone that makes gold and stops you from ever dying, said Harry. No wonder Snape's after it. Anyone would want it. And no wonder we couldn't find Flamel in that study of recent developments in wizardry, said Ron. He's not exactly recent if he's 665, is he? Yeah, well, all right, I said the same thing. The next morning, in Defense Against the Dark Arts, while copying down different ways of treating werewolf fights. Werewolf, there over there. Harry and Ron were still discussing what they'd do with Sorcerer's Stone if they had one. It wasn't until Ron said he'd buy his own Quidditch team that Harry remembered about Snape and the coming match. I'm going to play, said he told Ron and Hermione. If I don't, all the Slytherins will think I'm just too scared to face Snape. I'll show them. It'll really wipe the smiles off their faces if we win. Just as long as we're not wiping you off the field, said Hermione. Damn, Hermione. Usually it's something that, like, Ron would say. Wait, move my robe. As the match drew nearer, however, Harry became more and more nervous. Whatever he told Ron and Hermione, the rest of the team wasn't too calm either. The idea of overtaking Slytherin in the House Championship was wonderful. No one had done it for 7 years, but would they be allowed to with such a biased referee? Harry didn't know whether he was imagining it or not, but he seemed to keep running into Snape wherever he went. At times, he even wondered whether Snape was following him, trying to catch him on his own. Potions lessons were turning into a sort of weekly torture. Snape was so horrible to Harry. Could Snape possibly know they'd found out about the Sorcerer's Stone? Harry didn't see how he could, yet he sometimes had the horrible feeling that Snape could read minds. He can. Harry knew, when they wished him good luck outside the locker rooms the next afternoon, that Ron and Hermione were wondering whether they'd ever see him alive again. This wasn't what you'd call comforting. Harry hardly heard a word of Wood's pep talk as he pulled out his Quidditch robes and picked up his Nimbus 2000. Ron and Hermione, meanwhile, had found a place in the stands next to Neville, who couldn't understand why they looked so grim and worried, or why they had both brought their wands to the match. Wouldn't all the kids bring their wands with them all the time? Like, isn't that a thing? Little did Harry know that Ron and Hermione had been secretly practicing the leg locker curse. They'd gotten the idea from Malfoy using it on Neville, and were ready to use it on Snape if he showed any sign of wanting to hurt Harry. Now, don't forget, it's Locomotor Mortis, Hermione muttered as Ron slipped his wand up his sleeve. I know, Ron snapped. Don't nag. Back in the locker room, Wood had taken Harry aside. Don't want to pressure you, Potter. But if you needed an early capture of the snitch, it's now. Finish the game before Snape could favor Hufflepuff too much. The whole school's out there, said Fred Weasley, peering out the door. Even, blimey, Dumbledore's come to watch. Harry's heart did a somersault. You might want to go to a doctor for that. Dumbledore, he said, dashing to the door to make sure Fred was right. There was no mistaking that silver beard. Harry could have laughed out loud with relief. He was safe. There was simply no way that Snape would dare to try to hurt him if Dumbledore was watching. Perhaps that was why Snape was looking so angry as the teams marched onto the field, something that Ron noticed too. I've never seen Snape look so mean, he told Hermione. Look, they're off! Ouch! Someone had poked Ron in the back of the head. It was Malfoy. Oh, sorry, Weasley. Didn't see you there. Malfoy grinned broadly at Crabbe and Goyle. Wonder how long Potter's going to stay on his broom this time. Anyone want to bet? What about you, Weasley? Ron didn't answer. Snape had just awarded Hufflepuff a penalty because George Weasley had hit a bludger at him. Hermione, who had all her fingers crossed in her lap, was squinting fixedly at Harry, who was circling the game like a hawk, looking for the snitch. Snatch. You know how I think they choose people for the Gryffindor team? Said Malfoy loudly a few minutes later, as Snape awarded Hufflepuff another penalty for no reason at all. It's people they feel sorry for. See, there's Potter, who's got no parents, and there's the Weasleys, who've got no money. You should be on the team, Longbottom. You've got no brains. Neville went bright red, but turned in his seat to face Malfoy. I'm with 12 of you, Malfoy, he stammered. Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle howled with laughter, but Ron, still not daring to take his eyes from the Graham, said, You tell him, Neville. Longbottom, if brains were gold, you'd be poorer than Weasley. I'm not saying something. Ron's nerves were already stretched to the breaking point with anxiety about Harry. I'm warning you, Malfoy. One more word. Ron, said Hermione suddenly. Harry! What? Where? Harry had suddenly gone into a spectacular dive, which drew gasps and cheers from the crowd. Hermione stood up, her crossed fingers in her mouth, as Harry streaked toward the ground like a bullet. You're in luck, Weasley. Paul has obviously spotted some money on the ground, said Malfoy. Ron just fucking snapped. Before Malfoy knew what was happening, Ron was on top of him, wrestling him to the ground. Neville hesitated, then clambered over to the back of his seat to help. I'm just imagining Neville's like, all right, fuck it, let's go. Ready for some shit. Come on, Harry, Hermione screamed, leaping onto her seat to watch as Harry sped straight at Snape. She didn't even notice Malfoy and Ron rolling around under her seat, or the scuffles and yelps coming from the whirl of fists that was Neville, Crabbe, and Goyle. Up in the air, Snape turned on his broomstick just in time to see something scarlet shoot past him, missing him by inches. The next second, Harry had pulled out of the dive, his arm raised in triumph, the snitch clasped in his hand. The stands erupted. It had to be a record. No one could ever remember the snitch being caught so quickly. Ron, where are you? The game's over. Harry's won. We've won. Gryffindor's in the lead, shrieked Hermione, dancing up and down her seat and hugging Parvati Patel in the row in front. Harry jumped off his broom, a foot from the ground. He couldn't believe it. He'd done it. The game was over. It barely lasted 5 minutes. As Gryffindors came spilling onto the field, he saw Snape land nearby, white-faced and tight-lipped. Then Harry felt a hand on his shoulder and looked up into Dumbledore's smiling face. Well done, said Dumbledore quietly, so that only Harry could hear. Nice to see you haven't been brooding about that mirror. Been keeping busy. Excellent. Snape spat bitterly on the ground. Harry, how many pages? Oh, shit. Thought I could do it. I think I can. I don't think I can. I don't think I can. I thought I could. Let's stop there. I don't want to rush through it and blah, blah, blah. So we're now on page 279. All right. Well, let me unlock that for anyone who wants to jump on for a second. Or I could just stop the recording. Anybody gonna jump on? If not, that's okay. I will sign off. Be sure to check it out next week, same time, same place, next Thursday. Hi, Steph.
Hey, baby.
It won't let you refresh the thing.
No, the bottom two are locked.
Not on my screen.
They are in mine. Well, I guess it's just because I'm on.
Let me CJ, any luck? It's refreshing. So yeah, next Thursday, 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 7 p.m. East Standard Time. Hi, Jen.
Yay!
Whoa! Look at that face.